The studio felt different that morning, charged, restless, almost humming with something that couldn't be traced to the LED lights or the audience chatter. Crew members moved briskly across the polished floor of the View, clipping microphones onto chairs, adjusting camera angles, whispering tense reminders into headsets. It was the kind of energy that usually meant a big guest was on the roster. And today, that guest was Jim Carrey. Jim sat at the center of the semicircle of chairs, leaning back with an exaggerated ease that didn't quite disguise the coiled energy beneath his posture. He drummed his fingers lightly on the armrest, eyes shifting between the audience, the buzzing crew, and the table of note cards waiting in front of the hosts. There was a familiar spark in him, half mischief, half something sharper. His grin flickered in and out like a light refusing to commit to staying on. Across the table, co-host Joy Behar reviewed her questions with an intensity that didn't match the bright colors of her outfit. She glanced up at Jim every now and then, studying him with a mixture of curiosity and wary amusement, as if she already sensed the volatility simmering under his polite smile. Joy had navigated plenty of heated conversations on live television, but she also knew that Jim operated on an entirely different frequency, one that could be brilliant, chaotic, or both at once. A stage manager lifted his arm. "We're live in 30, he called out. The audience erupted into excited applause, loud enough that a camera operator winced and adjusted his headset. Jim gave a playful salute to the crowd, which triggered a series of enthusiastic cheers and a few people shouting his name. He laughed, but the sound had an edge, as though he were trying to shake off thoughts that had followed him into the studio. Joy watched him with a knowing smirk. "They love you," she said casually, as though making conversation, though her eyes were sharp. "That's the problem," Jim replied in a whisper loud enough for only her and perhaps the closest mic to catch. "People love me until I say something real." Joy opened her mouth to respond, but the countdown cut her off. 5, 4, 3, the last numbers were mouthed silently. The theme music blared. The audience surged into applause again. Joy turned toward the camera with her show host smile firmly in place. "Welcome back, everyone. We have a very special guest today, someone you all know from his iconic roles and, of course, his unique take on life. Please welcome the always unpredictable Jim Carrey." Jim threw his arms wide in a theatrical bow. The audience roared. One of the co-hosts laughed warmly. Another nodded with polite admiration. Joy simply watched him, assessing. They started with the usual friendly banter, his recent art projects, the films that had cemented his legacy, the surreal journey of navigating fame for decades. Jim answered with humor at first, the kind that ricocheted around the room, drawing bursts of laughter. He shifted voices, mimicked his younger self, even stood for a moment to exaggerate a story about a disastrous audition from years past. The audience loved it. But Joy didn't laugh every time. She chuckled at the appropriate beats, yet stayed anchored in a deeper focus, letting him run but not too far. When the laughter died down, she lifted a card from the table, flipping it with a deliberate slowness that instantly shifted the tone. "Jim," she began, her voice soft but pointed, "you've said some things recently about Hollywood, and about politics, that raised some eyebrows." The audience quieted. Even the steady hum of the studio's machinery felt muted. Jim blinked as if trying to determine whether she was easing into something personal or launching a direct strike. "Eyebrows," he repeated with a lopsided grin. "Eyebrows are meant to be raised, Joy. They'd be useless otherwise." A few audience members laughed, but Joy didn't. She set the card down gently, hands folding over it. "Sure," she said, "but some people think you went too far. Some think you contradicted yourself." There it was, the flick of the match. Jim stopped drumming his fingers. "Contradicted myself," he echoed, the humor draining slowly from his voice. "Is that what we're doing today?" "It's just a question," Joy replied, though her tone carried an unmistakable challenge. "We talk about these things." A co-host jumped in quickly, trying to smooth the edges. Jim, people are interested because you've always been outspoken. But Jim's attention stayed locked on Joy. And you've always been good at twisting things into a pretzel, he said, smiling, but his eyes were sharpening. Joy leaned forward slightly. No one's twisting anything. I'm asking you to clarify your own words. Jim tilted his head. My own words? Yes, Joy said. The ones you said on national television last month. A ripple of tension passed through the crowd. People leaned forward instinctively. The air in the room thickened, as if the lights had grown hotter. Jim exhaled, a slow and deliberate breath, then smirked, though it looked more forced than natural. Joy, you can question my movies, my career, my rubber face, fine. But don't sit there and pretend you know what I meant better than I do. Several audience members murmured. The co-hosts shifted, exchanging uneasy glances. A producer gestured for calm behind the cameras, but the tension had already begun to coil around the edges of the room, drawing every eye to the center table. Joy didn't blink. I'm not pretending anything, she replied. You said it. I'm asking you about it. And I'm telling you you're reading it wrong, Jim said, more firmly now. The studio had grown so quiet that even the faint rustle of a cue card seemed amplified. Jim's posture changed, his shoulders tightening, his humor fading, replaced by something harder, more defensive. Joy matched him, unflinching. The moment Joy leaned in and repeated her last line, then be honest, the studio shifted. It didn't tilt, didn't literally move, but the atmosphere changed with such force that everyone felt it in their bones. The audience hushed so abruptly it was as though someone had physically pressed a mute button. Even the cameras, humming softly on their mechanical pivots, seemed to pause mid-rotation. At the center of it all, Jim Carrey stared across the table, expression unreadable, as if deciding in real time whether to keep playing along or finally push back with the weight he'd been carrying since he sat down. The tension seemed to vibrate between him and co-host Joy Behar like a live wire stretched too tightly. Jim broke the silence first. Okay, he said, voice low and steady. You want honesty? Here it is. Joy folded her hands, bracing herself. The problem, Jim continued, isn't that I said anything contradictory. It's that people only listen to the version of me that fits the story they already want to tell. A smattering of applause erupted from a corner of the audience, hesitant, unsure. Joy shot them a quick glance, then turned back to Jim. That doesn't change the fact that your statements confused people, she said. If you're going to make bold claims, you've got to be able to explain them. Jim blinked, surprised by her persistence. Explain them? I've explained them a dozen times. Just because you don't like the explanation doesn't mean it isn't one. Joy's tone sharpened. Don't put this on me. I'm not the only one who thought your comments didn't make sense. And you're not the only one twisting my words, Jim fired back. That landed hard. The audience erupted, half gasping, half cheering, some even laughing nervously at the sudden intensity. One woman in the front row clutched the edge of her seat. A man near the back muttered, "Uh-oh," loud enough to be picked up by a boom mic. Joy raised her voice over the noise. I'm quoting you, Jim. Quoting. You said. Jim cut her off with a sharp wave of his hand. Yeah, I know what I said. I also know how this show works. I say something complicated, and you chop it into a headline. Joy's jaw tightened. Don't act like you're being attacked. I'm not acting, Jim snapped. I'm reacting. The audience noise swelled again, and this time the producers moved closer, gesturing frantically for everyone to calm down. One even mouthed to Joy, switched topics, but she either didn't see or chose not to. Jim, she said, her voice cutting through the noise, this is a conversation. If you can't handle pushback, maybe you shouldn't be making those statements. Jim froze. His entire body went still, as though her words had flipped a switch inside him.